Thank you for being here. Tonight, the school committee may seek to convene an open session and recess to executive session for the discussion and or action regarding these items of business. It stemmed from open meeting under general law 4246-4 and discussion and action NEA SK negotiations, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2, a discussion and action pending litigation via Nicole Solis versus South Kingston School District. Case CA number PC 2024-00376, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2, a discussion and action on litigation in the Johnson Garvey. CA number WM 2023-0578, Rhode Island General Law 4246-5A2. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to convene an executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mr. Bradley Share,
Here.
Mr. James Bestiva.
Here.
Ms. Calvetta stepped out for a moment, so she's present. Ms. Boyd.
Here.
Ms. Mastinesi.
Here.
Ms. Busso.
Here.
And myself, Paul Whitford, here. Please join us in pledge allegiance to the flag. To seal the minutes and it's a executive session.
I'll make a motion to seal the minutes of executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There were two votes taken in the executive session tonight regarding the same matter. They will be disclosed at the appropriate time.
Madam Chair. I'd like to make a motion to move items I and J on our school committee business up to under item C.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Any community members here? Is the consent agenda, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is our superintendent's report, and I'm gonna pass that over to Mr. Littlefield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members of the committee. My report will be brief this evening. You have in your packet your personal action form that informs you of leaves of absence and hires, et cetera. I would draw your attention to a retirement notice. Ms. Lori Bear, fourth grade teacher at Matunic School, has announced her intention to retire from teaching at the conclusion of this school year. Ms. Bear has been at Matunic School since 2002, and I've been fortunate to visit her classroom at Matunic several times this year. That's been very rewarding for me. I've known Ms. Bear as a neighbor for quite some time, and I now know what a loss this will be for the district when she retires. But we certainly wish her well, and we will have a more formal recognition of all of our retirees later in the year. I give a big shout out, if I could, to the cast and crew of the West Kingston Elementary School Gear Production cast and crew that took place last week at the high school auditorium. It was Go Figure, and it was a mathematically themed show. Great display of community and a great amount of fun. I'd be remiss if I didn't give special recognition for Principal Dr. Ryan Borden for his award-winning performance as the mathematician magician in the show. It was great. I also had the pleasure of attending the South Kingstown Education Foundation's fundraising event last evening at the Ocean Mist Restaurant. The organizer, Kate Gardner from the SKEF, was gracious enough to give me a few minutes in between bingo games to speak to the crowd and make sure that everyone there was aware of our upcoming bond vote on May 7, and to make sure that they had directions for how to navigate to our website to learn all they could about the school building project. And that concludes my superintendent's report.
Make a motion to accept the superintendent's report.
Second.
Any questions for Mr. Littlefield? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is discussion and action. This, on the litigation to Nicole Solis in South Kingston School District. There is no further discussion needed on that at this time. So the next item on the agenda is our Transportation Subcommittee, which I will pass that over to Mr. Receiver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that. Just a couple updates for the committee on what we're working on the Transportation Subcommittee. So it might be a couple things we bring up to a vote in upcoming sessions. But for now, a couple topics that we're bringing to the table are discussions around a late bus for elementary schools to accommodate students who may not otherwise have transportation for after-school activities. We're talking about possibly doing that at Peacedale to start and bring it to other elementary schools if needed. And the other big topic we're talking about is the combination of high school and middle school bus routes to help look at mitigating not so much savings, but more along the lines of mitigating the amount of time kids might spend on buses, might help save them time in the mornings and afternoons to be on a combined route. But we're still talking through the implications of that and the financial aspects. I'll be talking to Mr. Kilpatrick at some point to, bring those numbers to us if there's going to be any kind of savings possibly to look at. Yeah, those are the things I want to bring up. I do want to ask on the next agenda if we could look at an appointment for the subcommittee. I do have an interested individual. And because the agenda item wasn't appropriate for tonight, we couldn't appoint him tonight. But if we could have an appointment discussion action on the next agenda topic, I'd appreciate that.
Moving I and J up above C. No, after C. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Okay, so next item on the agenda is C, and it is a discussion and action on a fundraiser for South Kingston High School Class 2020.
Here. This is a request, Madam Chair, from the class of 2024, from their class advisors. And they're looking to do a fundraiser at Applebee's and Panera night, where sales will be donated to the senior class to assist them with the cost of their senior prom and their class trip, which you approved at a previous meeting. They expect to earn $400 through this fundraiser, and I believe it's a good cause.
I hope they earn more than that. I'd like to make a motion to approve the fundraiser for the South Kingston High School class of 2024 Applebee's and Panera night.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Okay, so next item on the agenda is discussion and action on policy 1236, non-discrimination, transgender, and gender expansive policy. It is a second read, and I will pass that over to Ms. Boyd.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Before you this evening and posted to board docs is the version without revisions, a clean version for your review. The last time we had this on our floor for a first read, there were minimal comments with input specifically asking about how we consider or how the administration will consider supporting some of the training potentially down the road. Yesterday, the subcommittee met and I do have a packet with me that was provided by some of the mental health staff. There are significant number of trainings that are available at no cost through the ACLU, through the Human Rights Campaign, NEA, among others, if folks are interested. But again, this would be something that our administration would need to consider in its process, as well as the Professional Development Committee. Beyond that, I don't have any additional updates.
Ms. Better?
So I think I was the one that had the questions regarding professional development, making sure there was ample opportunities for people to have that. I think that it's a very important part of this policy, and it needs to make sure that the administration allows people that whatever time and resources they need to get that training. So I really appreciate you going out and making that effort to find those resources. So thank you.
To approve? Oh,
Motion to approve policy, is it 1236, Ms. Boyd? Policy 1236 as presented.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Next item is policy 8220. And that will go back to Mrs. Boyd.
Yes, thank you. Similar concept last week or at a last meeting, excuse me, we had the opportunity to review updates to policy 8220. And this is a clean version presented before you. The hope of these revisions, again, was to provide a cleaner and clearer understanding of what is directory versus non-directory information in our district, and at the request of our administrative staff to make that as clear as possible when communicating with parents. And so with input from our building and administrative leaders, we were able to look at other policies and are allowed legally to just have a form that indicates opt out and to try and clarify that process. So that is what is presented for you tonight, a simpler and cleaner form to hopefully make this an easier process for all involved.
To approve policy 8220, student confidentiality as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Next item on the agenda is a discussion and action for the school building committee updates. I'll pass that over to Ms. Massanutten.
So I don't have much to update today because we've not had a school committee meeting in between our last two meetings. When we have one tomorrow, well, we have the major update, I should say, we did have a meeting in between, I'm sorry. The major update will be presented to the joint school building, the school committee and the town council tomorrow night at in the middle of our budget meeting. The interview selection team unanimously came up with recommending Studio Jade in collaboration with SLAM for our architect, engineer, and design team to move forward with our planning for stage 3 of the school building committee project. I'm very pleased to hear that. It's exciting to know that Phil Conti and his team will be continuing to move along with us. He has the pulse of South Kingstown. He's earned a lot of people's trust. He took charge with us when, quite frankly, no one else would. And he believed in South Kingstown. He has put blood, sweat, and tears into our community. So I'm very pleased that that the interview committee, or excuse me, team was able to come to this conclusion. There will be a larger discussion tomorrow night with the town council to go over that. Chris Spiegel from Left Field will be in attendance as well in case we need to any process questions as to what we do going forward will take place. So, but that's really, I believe, all I have to say because we'll get into it tomorrow.
Thank you. Exciting. Next item on the agenda is discussion and action on educational survey for equity and inclusion service. And pass that back to Mr. Littlefield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You have in your packet information from the our proposals to conduct the equity audit. You'll remember that back in November, we sent out a request for proposal. And we got nine submissions. I assembled a task force that the committee directed me to do, and our task force consisted of Melissa Boyd, school committee member, Principal Elizabeth McGuire from Matunic School, and Kevin Sekel, Assistant Principal, Broad Rock School, Jonathan Sigmund from Peacedale School Social Worker, music teacher Jennifer Collins, and community members Donna Caldwell and Taylor Ellis. They reviewed the proposals, and we met on the 29th of February, and all of the programs were submitted to us in a separate envelope from the budget. And we had lengthy discussions about the pros and cons of each of the proposals. And then after we had done that and we had ranked them, then we opened the envelopes for that included budget information. They have recommended to us their top three choices in no particular order other than alphabetical. The consortium from Wilmington, Delaware, the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, and the West Wind Education Policy Group. And so as we had planned, I present this to the committee for the committee to make the final decision as to where how you would like to proceed with the equity audit.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Littlefield before I?
Well, just I have thoughts about the three that. So you had sent us the top three, or you sent us all of them. Thank you. But indicated the top three from the committee, and you said out of those three, they weren't in a particular order. So I guess, well, one question I have is one of them, their proposal is more costly than what we budgeted. So I assume you included that one in the top three because it's possible for us to pay that amount from some other fund that wasn't budgeted. No, I included it because it was part of the top three, regardless of cost. That we agreed that we would send three to the committee, but I will tell you that we had budgeted $80,000 for the project, and that information was passed on to the candidates, and yet these were the budgets that were submitted to us. Yeah, so I assume that the two that came in just under budget had adjusted their proposal to meet our needs. So that, I think that's a consideration. It's another conversation we have to have if we want to find almost $30,000 more to put into this. For me, I think the couple things stood out. The consortium, mentioned that the lead person was someone from South Kingstown, which is nice to have someone connected, but they sent us a whole list of very impressive resumes, people with very impressive backgrounds, but not that person. So it seemed odd to me that they listed so many people in their background, but not the person who would be the lead on our case. And the issue that I had with 2 out of 3, so the Mid-Atlantic and the consortium, were that both of them plan to do their a lot of their interaction by Zoom, pretty much all of them. While the West Wind actually plans to come here and do in-person meetings, and they also broke out a bunch of very specific subgroups that they wanted to seek out within the community to have those in-person conversations with. And all of us, I know I have had a lot of time on Zoom over the last few years. And one thing that's very clear to me is it's not the same as being in the room and seeing people and talking to them in person, especially when the subject matter is very personal and sensitive often, and that you want to get people talking, which is, I think, much more viable in person than it is over Zoom. So, I mean, I think they all are impressive in different ways and seem qualified. The thing that stood out to me was that piece that West Wind was planning to come here in person to have those meetings. And I think the other 2 are all remote. It's their West Wind education policy is was the in-person. I don't remember getting these proposals. I'm not seeing them.
They were sent to you via email. There was a folder that was shared by
What?
Jerry.
When?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was not, I'm not prepared to make a decision tonight then. I have not reviewed them.
So I found Brad's comments very interesting and I missed that. What I noticed was they were all good. They were all had pretty much the same components. I think the committee that did the selection probably saw that these were very thorough proposals. And so I found a lot of similarities between them that I like. The consortium, I do think came in on the high side, and when the others were just as strong, I don't think there's a reason to pay on the high side. What struck me with the West Wind was they had such a short timeline. They were going to do all this in 5 months. And I found that particularly worrisome, that how do you do a thorough job in 5 months? Where the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium they're the longest with a 12-month window. And I thought, wow, that would be what I would think this really would take as a year. So I was really impressed with that one, the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium, for those reasons.
I am fortunate that I got to review all of these, and I would echo that we are very lucky, I think, as a district, that there were so many interested parties and they were all well qualified. I certainly agree with the top 3 as strong candidates. For the same reason, I had the consortium a little bit lower in terms of not the points that have already been made by my colleagues. Personally, the 2 that I felt were strongest were Mid-Atlantic and Insight. Specifically Insight for its work related to strong theory background. And I'll mention that briefly. Based on the content that I teach and that I deliver at URI, I felt that was well represented, their context and their approach. I also appreciated that they had a length of time to do this work, and we're looking at a wide variety of assessment inputs and tools to do that, focused on very highly effective practices in this area. strong representation from stakeholders. I think many of them showed that, but they were looking at digging into some of the root causes of why we even need to do this equity audit, which I thought was positive for our district and our history. And I will mention Mid-Atlantic as well, which also I ranked very highly for similar reasons. Maybe a little bit less of what struck me a little bit is they had some distinct structure of how they were going to do their focus groups. And I'm not sure if they're open to us changing that based on our community, but they had a limit of 10 participants per specific group, which I didn't think would fit our community in every particular group or realm. So that's why I ranked them a little bit lower.
Oh, and if we're looking at time frame, if someone is coming in person and they're at a shorter time frame, to me, that's more valuable. Getting getting somebody's authentic self in person human interaction tends to me lead to more fruitful results. And if they can do that in person versus 5 months, and I'm granted they wouldn't be here for 5 months in person, but having that ability to do that versus maybe investing more time, but you're not getting truly authentic interactions being strictly virtual, kind of has me on the line there. But that was really the only thing that I'd have to say on the topic at the moment.
Battling COVID or when it came in, but I missed that. And so I am not in a position to make a educated decision.
And I'll try to support that.
Can I?
Question on that then procedurally and timeline wise, is it possible to table this decision until all 7 can be up to speed, like as far as our timeline goes? I don't want to delay it any more than it needs to be, but at the same time, it would be lovely to have 7 folks who are able to get into the meat of it.
Are you asking my opinion? My opinion is that it's too important a decision to make without everyone being entirely familiar with the choices. And so I think it would be entirely appropriate to table.
Can I
Thank
just
you
ask
for that.
can I ask a question before we move on to the, I guess Bob led the search. Were there discussions in the committee that, I mean, having listened to sort of our initial reaction, were there things that came up that we're not talking about or that we should be thinking about as we're reading through these that were things that the committee distinguished between different proposals?
Some of the things that came up at committee discussion was that they were very concerned that whoever did the audit would commit themselves to becoming familiar with our community, not be rushed, so that they could ease into the process, for lack of a better term, ease into the process to gain the trust of the community, so that it would be an authentic audit. They were looking at their references to see if they had done work in communities similar to ours, and in specifically, and then in general, did they do work for school systems the size of ours? They were also looking for proposals that were not limited simply to issues of race equity, but equity in terms of socioeconomic groups, gender identity, et cetera. And it was on the basis of those issues, along with the others that were included in the rubric that they based their decisions on.
I'd like to make a request that, for us members that did not get through all of those requests, that we get the 3 that we are looking at, so that when we come back to the table in 2 weeks, we'll be able to make that informed vote. Thank you. And do we have a motion to table that in the meantime?
I'd like to make a motion to table the educational survey for equity and inclusion services to our very next meeting.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is, the superintendent search, nest deck update, and appointments.
Interested, given the various positions. And I'm just gonna, since he did that process, I'm gonna ask Mr. Littlefield to just kind of fill us in on that regard.
I consulted with our leadership team and presented the positions that we wanted to see represented on our screening team. And from there, I then started to reach out to people. And I will tell you that reaching out to people and being very clear about the commitment that they would be making, that they would be committing to attending all of the sessions and maintaining confidentiality, et cetera. So I will tell you that we had a number of promising people who just could not commit, but we've got and I would present a list to you of very, very promising people who are willing to commit. So you have a list in front of you that contains Ms. Better and Mr. Shear representing the school committee. Ms. Christina Lyman, who is our Director of Student Services, who will be representing central office. John Rapport, Principal of Peacedale Elementary School, who will be representing our school administrators. I have an addition to the list and I would ask that you consider, because she just answered me this evening and said I would love to participate. Ms. Allison Rosen, who's a third grade teacher at Peacedale School, who is an SK graduate, SK parent, and South Kingstown teacher. Ms. Bridget Gonzalez, who is the president representing NEA-SK. Parents, you had asked that we have someone who could represent both elementary, middle, and high school levels. Ms. Katie Garvin, Ms. Alicia Mosley Austin, and Ms. Laura Roebuck. They have all agreed to serve on the committee. So has Melissa Taylor, who is the president of SK Educational Support Personnel. And she will be representing that group. I will tell you, I interviewed personally our student representative, Ms. Sophia Cato, South Kingstown Rebel, who was flattered that we asked and is very interested in participating. We have one more parent to join, and it was suggested that we find a parent who could represent both experiences in athletics and in fine arts. I've reached out to a couple, but you can imagine if you have a child who's actively involved in both athletics and fine arts, it's difficult to find the time to commit. But I did reach out to a parent late this morning, and I'm waiting to hear. So that final position is to be announced. But this is the slate that I would propose to the committee that you approve, so that they can have their initial meeting with Drs. DeRusi and Mercurio on Monday, April 4th would be the initial meeting to orient everybody to the process.
No more further comments or questions. I would like to ask if there's a motion to approve.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion that the slate as presented by Mr. Littlefield be accepted to begin work on April 4th as the screening committee for the search for the next superintendent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes.
And perhaps I was remiss, Madam Chair, in pointing out what the responsibility of this screening team is. They will be reviewing applications presented to them by NESDEC, and they will be identifying the candidates to be interviewed. We had two online forum yesterday, one in the afternoon and one in the evening that was open to members of the community, where they could meet with the NESDEC team and give their input about what they would be looking for in a superintendent. We have the survey that has been put out on all kinds of social media to get people's input as to what they would like to see in their next superintendent. We have in-person forums scheduled for tomorrow, one in the afternoon, for any and all members of South Kingstown School Department staff. That's at 4 o'clock tomorrow here in the high school library. And then Thursday, all right, I would not want to miss our joint meeting with the town council tomorrow and jump ahead. Thank you for correcting me. On Thursday, yes, that would be Thursday is the forum for staff at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then in the evening for members of the community to come in and share their expectations with the NESDEC team. And then once all those data are gathered, then the team will share with the screening team what are the characteristics that the community has identified that they would like to see in the next superintendent. And then the team will be charged with reviewing applications and then picking the candidates to be interviewed in the preliminary process. And then once those interviews are completed, they will recommend to you, the committee, a list of finalists for you to consider.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Thank you, Ms. Vedder. Okay,
Well,
and any questions?
I don't have any question on that. A couple people have come in since we got past community comment. So I was just wondering if it's possible before we get into the budget discussion, if I can make a motion to open back up to community comment if somebody wanted to speak before we continued, or is It's just that we moved pretty quickly and there was nobody here and now we have 3 community members. So I didn't know if they may not want to talk. I'm just assuming maybe they do.
I had a good mind to ask if there was anybody that wanted to speak. But I also wanted us to get through our agenda, and then come back to that. Is that okay? All right, thank you. Okay, so I would move on to the next item on our agenda, is with Mr. Kirkpatrick. It's the budget amendment, 23-24 budget amendment.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So you have before you the most recent slate of budget amendments presented at the Budget Subcommittee meeting last week. So essentially, we have the first one there was just an amendment to fund the second stage of our contract with Left Field. That's the OPM services. And then secondly, we had an amendment to fund some technology grant services. And essentially, the bottom lines for both of those for the funds, I'm sorry, not the accounts. The funds stay the same, but just transferring from one account to the other. So just asking for your approval on those amendments. If you approve them, we will execute those in the accounting system tomorrow.
I make a motion that we accept the budget amendments as presented by Mr. Kilpatrick.
Second.
Any questions? Ms. Boyd?
Just a comment and a question, just to be clear, I know we often get, and I expect tomorrow we'll get questions about the school committees, the school department's contributions to our bonding project. And what I see as Amendment 1 is in writing, and if approved tonight, that first significant payment towards this project that is coming directly out of our existing budget. Is that correct?
Yes, it would actually be the third, but yes.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, absolutely. Good, great question.
Just to follow on Ms. Boyd's question, the 161,420 I see in there for the amended budget, is that in the other services? Is that all for Left Field or is there?
Correct.
Others? It is. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
You got
that.
it. Great question.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Kirkpatrick? Okay, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. The next one. Hand it right over to you.
Okay, well, good evening again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So I am here once again to discuss with you the fiscal year 2025 proposed budget. And the purpose of this presentation is twofold. So the first is to allow you to see and vote on a revision that I made based on some feedback that I received at the Budget Subcommittee meeting last week. And also you'll be able to see the presentation I intend to give to the town council tomorrow evening. So it's a twofold agenda here for this presentation. And I'm happy to take your comments and questions as we go through. And there's a lot of information to cover here, so I'll do my best to be clear and concise. Looking at our agenda here, basically just going to give everyone the bottom line up front. So I won't leave you in suspense, just tell you the main drivers, the main takeaways from the proposal for fiscal 2025. We'll look through our overview of funds. We'll discuss enrollment and staffing, and then we'll look specifically at some of our funds, such as the general fund, capital fund, and then all of our other funds. I have a few slides on our fund balance and some outstanding contingencies, and then we'll wrap it up with a nice summary of our total proposed budget across all funds. Okay, slide 3, looking at the bottom line up front, also known as the bluff. So the school department is not requesting any additional funds from the town for fiscal year 2025. So essentially, we're requesting to be level funded again. The fiscal year 2025 general fund budget represents a 0.3% decrease from fiscal year 2024. The fiscal year 25 CIP, which is the capital improvement program budget, represents a 92.7% increase over fiscal year 2024. And I'll elaborate on that as we proceed. Our proposed use of $1.1 million of unassigned fund balance is to finance our capital projects and not our operations. And lastly, our fiscal year 2025 total budget across all fund types represents a 2.2% decrease from fiscal year 2024. And again, I'll fill in all these details as we go. Okay, proceeding to slide 4. Another bottom line up front here, just a word on the debt service. So very important question that we've been asked repeatedly. We want to make sure we can state this right up front, is how is the school district contributing to the new South Kingstown High School bond debt service? So here's a list that we put together here to try to help the town council and the residents of South Kingstown understand ways in which benefits of this project will accrue to the town. So we are not requesting additional tax transfer from the town for fiscal year 2025. This allows the town's budget to grow and increase for necessary services. The town will receive housing aid reimbursements. So those are reimbursements for previously bonded projects that have been completed as of June 30 of any fiscal year. And the town is currently depositing those monies into their debt service fund. The town will also receive pay-as-you-go reimbursements as part of the School Building Authority Memorandum of Agreement, and that amount is about $9.7 million. So pay-as-you-go funds are available upon the expenses being incurred, so we can request reimbursement immediately as we get those invoices from the contractor, and the town will accrue those benefits as well. We're also paying for the owner's project management and architect services up front, up to an amount of $350,000. And again, those expenses qualify for the 35% reimbursement as well, should the bond pass. And lastly, we are using our fund balance reserves to finance our capital improvement program. One other item I don't have listed here, but I was given a tip from RIDE this week. There are other districts in Rhode Island that when they construct new buildings, new school buildings, the school districts have agreed to share the new savings and utilities with the towns, with the municipalities. That's something for the committee to consider as another card we could show, acting in good faith to try to support the project, essentially. So the representative at RIDE promised he could provide me the language in these particular agreements with these other municipalities, so we can have an example of how that would look. So that's just another opportunity for us to say, if we have this brand new building, we'll hopefully save significant money on utilities and maintenance, things of that nature. And we would be happy to, based on your feedback, to share that with the town. Any questions on this slide?
I know you touched upon the housing aid reimbursement, and I just wanted to make sure everybody at the table understood completely what that has meant for us over the years. And if anybody needs clarifying on what that might mean, but if the community might be interested to know what that means for our bottom line.
Sure. So those reimbursements are right now accruing to the town. So it's going into the debt service. So there was previously issued bonds for capital projects. And those projects are completed. So we just submit for the reimbursement, and then the town deposits it right into the debt service fund. So they're able to offset that cost. So, which is great. One other option, one other thing to consider is an alternative use of the housing aid reimbursements is creating a revolving capital fund. A lot of districts do that as well, but that would be something we would have to ask the town to establish. That would be an agreement between us and the town. But the point of this slide is just to provide the council and the residents of South Kingstown right up front. Here's the way in which the school district is hoping to support the project. Okay, moving to the next slide. This is essentially the change that I made, the revision, the primary revision. So if you look all the way to the right at that 2024-25 adopted column, that is the budget that you adopted 2 weeks ago. The revised column is the budget I'm asking you to adopt tonight. And if you look at the highlighted cells there, the use of fund balance is the primary change. So looking at the general fund column, that number changed from $177,016 to $0. And looking at the capital fund column, that amount is now $1,161,356. And so that's an increase of $222,984. So essentially all we're doing is we are adding the West Kingston parking lot project to the CIP list. So instead of accounting for that in the general fund, I'm just going to add it to the CIP fund, and that's where we'll account for it. And instead of the $177,000 of fund balance to fund that project, we're just going to go with the full 400 that we presented to the council back in December. And that is part of the approved capital plan that the council voted on back in January as well. So that's the number we've been presenting towards that project. So that's the primary driver for that change there. So I'll just reiterate, 100% of the fund balance appropriation for next year is for capital projects, not for operations. And so if you look all the way to the right, the change there is the $222,984. Same thing on the expenditure side. So it balances out. That was kind of a lot, so I'll pause. Any questions or concerns with that?
It came up at a previous town council meeting, so I just want to follow up. Do we know what percentage of our capital improvements are on our elementary schools? I know they're significant because we've got the whole parking lot issue at West Kingston. I know there are things at Broad Rock. But I just kind of want to emphasize that we are making the needed investment in our elementary schools. So if we just had the percentage maybe of all of the capital improvements, how much are going to the elementary schools?
That's a great question. I'm doing a rough calculation here. It's probably close to 35% for next year. And the majority of that is the parking lot for West Kingston.
Great, thank you.
Yep. You did ask me that a couple weeks ago. I should have had it. But rough calculation, 35%. Any other questions on the primary revision here? So again, asking you to vote on a new bottom line of $66,816,779. And we can wait till the end of the presentation if you want for that. Okay, very good. Now looking at our overview of funds. So essentially what you see here is what I'll call the district's portfolio. So these are the various types of funds that we use to educate the district's children. So first fund listed there is our general fund. That's also known as our operating budget. And that's funded by the town tax appropriation, state aid, and other local sources. We have our restricted funds, which are primarily our federal and state grants. And then our enterprise fund, we have only one enterprise fund, and that's the National School Lunch Program. That is funded 100% by federal and state reimbursements and meal sales. And lastly, we have our capital fund, which is where we account for our capital improvement program. And for the more recent years, we've been funding that through use of reserves, fund balance, and federal grant reimbursements as well. Any questions here? Very good. Okay, we will transition into our discussion of enrollment. And we're looking at slide 8. So moving from very broad, looking at the national and regional trends. This is the United States Department of Education's enrollment expectations, and I'll clarify public school enrollment expectations through 2030. And if you look at the Northeast trend there, they're expecting about a 6% decrease, and Rhode Island specifically is tracking right along with that trend. So the Rhode Island trend matches basically the broader Northeast trend. Okay, looking at slide 9, zooming in a little bit further now, just looking at Rhode Island specifically as a state. South Kingstown is one of many districts in the state with a long-term enrollment decline. And essentially, in this grouping here, this is just a rough sample of some other districts. In this sampling here, South Kingstown is the leader in the group at about 22% long-term decline in enrollment. And I'll just say that there's a variety of these students are not necessarily disappearing, I'll say, or moving out of the district. A lot of them are enrolling in their public school of choice. So this is the charter schools and CTE programs elsewhere. We also have our special education outplaced and private special education outplaced students and homeschool as well, which you'll see on the next slide. So the key point is that essentially, even though we've had an enrollment decline, pretty significant one long-term, we're still financially responsible for the students who still reside in the district. And then moving one more to slide 10, our last enrollment slide here, looking at South Kingstown specifically. So the South Kingstown long-term trend we're expecting to continue next year. And if you look at the projected column there, the 2,288 students, that comes directly from our NESDEC projections provided to us back in January. So that's a net decrease of about 60 students next year projected. And again, that net loss of 60 students could include students moving out of the district, but also enrolling in other programs and still residing in the district. Any questions on these slides? Excellent. Okay, we'll look at our out of district enrollments now in slide 11. So I modified this slide pretty significantly from our budget subcommittee. So there's a lot here. I'll try to go slow. So in the table up above, you basically have our enrollments by school type. So that's your charters, your CTE, which is career and tech, your special education, private and outplaced, and then your state funded schools. And if you look at the actual amount for 2024, that's current fiscal year, we're at about 301 students. Those students we are paying out of district tuitions for. For next year, based on the long-term trend, the current trend, we're expecting an additional 18 students and budgeting for an additional 18 students to enroll out of district next year. On the bottom left, you'll see a nice visualization of that table. So that is simply showing in the bars there our in-district enrollment. And then you'll see that orange line is just the trend of out-of-district enrollments. So it's just a negative relationship inverse. And as our in-district enrollment has decreased, our out-of-district enrollment has increased. And then zooming in on the right, you can see our out-of-district enrollment by type. So you can see where the kids are migrating to as they choose to be educated elsewhere. Where are they going? And the primary leaders in that category are the charter schools and other CTE programs. And I'll just reiterate one more time. If kids reside in the district and choose to be educated elsewhere, we are still financially responsible for them. Which is the primary reason why a contraction in enrollment does not always automatically translate into a contraction in costs or savings, cost savings.
So I brought this up in the subcommittee meeting, and I'd like to kind of, if I don't know how to clarify it, because it is in the homeschool line item. And our homeschool, it is difficult to track our homeschool kids and families. We have that initial, they apply to homeschool, we approve that they're homeschooling. And then from there, sometimes they come back within a month, sometimes they move out of district, sometimes they stay where they are. So it is difficult to kind of determine the numbers. And I'm just curious, two things is number one, how do we track them? But more importantly, with this particular table. So and just going back historically in the year 2019, 2020, we had technically 3 children who homeschooled that year. And then it jumps, obviously COVID hits, that number jumps in 2021 up to 37 who technically, I'm assuming, homeschooled that year. And then it seems to continue, obviously the number continues to drastically increase over time. And my question is, for the projected 24-25, we're at 95 kids. Is that a total number of kids in our district for the 24-25 school year are homeschooling that year? Or is that a tally of all the applications of homeschooling that we've gotten since 2019? So I'm not sure
Great.
how we can figure that out.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for the current actual homeschool roster, I'm just using the RIDE enrollment reports. That additional 7 for next year is just a rough trend. Essentially, it's not based on looking at specific requests or things of that nature.
Madam Chair, if I may, you bring up a good point, Ms. Massananti, that admittedly, keeping track of SK homeschool students has been difficult in the past. And we're talking now at admin about stepping up the process and making sure that we are connecting with all of our homeschool families prior to the end of the school year. We can ask, did your child make adequate progress during this school year, and do you intend to continue to homeschool going into next year. And we'll step up that effort before the end of this school year. Without that effort, you're correct. We don't know how many of those students have left the district, moved, or B, have they enrolled in private schools as they move from from elementary to middle to high school? No, we don't know that. What we can report to you is each time we meet, we report to you the requests that have been made to homeschool children, and we can report to you what RIDE tells us are our homeschool kids.
To dig a little deeper on that. So, and I will also clarify that while we're responsible for South Kingstown kids, we are not the only community that has a hard time tracking homeschool students. That's across the state, across the nation. That's a scenario once the parents decide I'm taking my child and now they're in my care and custody for schooling. That's where they reside. So, but again, I'm kind of my second tier question is, do we know that 95 children in South Kingstown School District are getting schooled from home this year? That seems to be like a really high number. Not that it, like, to me, it typically would be 16 children would be homeschooled in a school year. 95 seems to be like an inflated number.
I point to you the long-term effect of the COVID pandemic as people, and this is just conjecture, that people became accustomed to learning at home, and as they explored ways that they could continue to learn from home, they found out that there are options, and they've chosen to do so.
I think my understanding is that this is a national trend. This is not a local South Kingstown trend. And I don't know how our trending compares to national numbers, but it's certainly not something we're alone in experiencing.
So I just went to the RIDE enrollment census, and homeschooled as of right now in South Kingstown, we're at 91. So it's 3 more than I had at the table already. So, but good question, good discussion.
If memory serves me correctly, and I didn't do any research on this before tonight's meeting, we have a homeschool policy. Yeah, so that might need some revisiting.
Sure.
And seeing, but like what Mr. Shear said, I've read several articles that have indicated that homeschooling across the nation is like expanding exponentially.
Good points, good discussion. Any other questions on this slide? Concerns, critiques, ways to improve it? Very good, thank you. All right, we will transition now into our discussion of staffing. So looking at slide 13, so you have in front of you here simply a long-term trend by position type in the district going back to 2017 and 18. And you can see our budget for fiscal year 2024 compared to 2025. We're looking at a potential reduction of about 16.9 FTEs, primarily in instructional staff. Questions here? Pretty straightforward. Looking at slide 14 now, just amplifying the information. If you look at the table or the chart on the left, it's just a visual representation of the table on the previous slide. So you can see the trends, the long-term trends in the position type. And then on the right, I just have instructional staff broken out specifically so you can see that long-term trend as well. So instructional staff is down roughly 18% since the peak in 2019. Total staff across the board is down about 17% over that time frame. So essentially, the primary driver of the reductions has been in instructional staff. Okay. Transitioning to our discussion of the general fund. So slide 16, looking at the revenue side. Essentially, we have our proposed revenue by source. And listed at the top there, we have our municipal appropriation from the town at $55.9 million, which is the same as the previous 4 fiscal years. We have our tuition incomes down slightly based on current trends. We have our trust fund income, which is essentially level for the past few fiscal years. We have some miscellaneous receipts as well, ticking up slightly, just trying to account for some additional ancillary events that, so like rentals and other donations, cash receipts, things of that nature. Our formula aid, you'll notice is down $94,150. Our high cost special education aid is up $196,000. And our Medicaid reimbursements, we're anticipating an increase of about 25,000, and that's just based on some better coordination with our claims provider. We think we can get some monies back to the district. For a total bottom line decrease of $177,016 or 0.3% from fiscal year 2024.
And I'm going back, you don't have to move the slides back, and you should check my math. But I think if I'm doing the math right, we're projecting a 3% decline in enrollment, but staffing is declining by 4%. And the enrollment decline is, you've already calculated. We didn't calculate the 1-year staffing decrease, but I think again, putting those numbers next to each other will be helpful to demonstrate that what has been criticized in the past is a failure to reduce staffing at the same pace as enrollment. We're actually decreasing staffing, I think, next year at a faster pace.
That's great feedback. I can add that column. That's helpful. Just making a note. Excellent. All right. Very good. Any other questions on the general fund revenue side? Very good. Looking at slide 17, now we're looking at state aid in the general fund. So you have before you the governor's recommended aid released back in January, which is of course subject to change. So looking at the comparison between the actual for this year and the projected for next year, you'll notice the formula aid is down 166,000, which is slightly different from the previous slide. And essentially, when the budget was enacted last year, it was not revised to include the state enacted aid. So it was actually a lower number budgeted for. We ended up receiving more aid. So it looks like a larger decrease comparing the actual aid we received to the projected next year. Just wanted to explain that in case there was any confusion. The high cost special education aid, again, an increase of about $44,000. In our non-public transportation and our multilingual learner categorical funds are increasing as well. Those accrue to us through invoice credits. So those are not direct aid payments paid to the district or to the town. Those come through reductions on invoices. At the bottom there, you can just see a snapshot from the press release from the governor's budget. And you can see all of the categories of South Kingstown's aid there. So bottom line decrease of about 1.3%.
Mr. Kilpatrick,
Yes, sir.
is there a particular reason why you chose to include Situate and Smithfield in this chart?
It was a matter of clip art expediency. Basically just trying to take the snapshot from the PDF.
So, okay, so you did clip art and they just
I-
happened to tag along?
I snipped it right from the PDF so that there was no manipulation. Just wanted to see, this is where, if you go and look at the governor's.
Just, this is
budget,
where we
this is-
fell in the alphabet?
Correct.
Thank you.
Exactly. Yes. But I think to avoid confusion, because that's a great question, I'll edit that out so that we're not showing that we're comparing ourselves to Situate or Smithfield. It's simply where we are on the list. Great question.
had I had a question on the comparison between this slide and the last slide. And,
Sure.
I noticed that on the formula aid, in this slide, well, sorry, no, the one, the next one, the previous one you had up, next one, yeah, is higher than the formula aid in the previous slide. Is
Correct.
that, I noticed it's actual versus budget. Is
Correct.
that the difference? So we
Correct,
actually got,
exactly.
so we actually received a little bit more than what we
Correct.
budgeted for. Okay,
Exactly. So
just wanted to
we
clarify.
should have amended the budget upwards. Yep.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, great question. Okay, very good. Moving now to our discussion of general fund expenditures, and we're going to look at the assumptions that drove our expenditure projections for next year. So first, we have our salaries. We budgeted for a 2.25% increase across all of our collective bargaining units, and those increases are going to be offset by potential decreases in FTEs. Looking at benefits, again, same thing, increases may be offset by a decrease in FTEs. So we budgeted for an 8% increase in health and 2% increase in dental premiums. And that's based on information we received from the Rhode Island Trust. They gave us a range. We should have their final expectations relatively soon. It didn't make it into this presentation. And then the ER/SRI defined benefit contributions, those rates decreased slightly. So that was a very minor cost savings. And then looking at transportation, our general education transportation, we have a 4% contractual increase there. Our special education transportation costs are expected to increase 36%. The primary driver there is essentially we under budgeted for fiscal 24. So we have to get it in line with our current spend rates. And then lastly, our tuitions, our out-of-district tuitions, we're expecting to increase about 11% over fiscal year 2024. And all things considered, these line items account for about 91% of the total budget, total operating budget. So any significant cost savings we would like to find will have to come from these categories. The rest of the budget is only 9%. Questions or concerns? Very good. Looking at slide 19, this is a summary of our general fund expenditures by object category. And essentially, you'll notice the significant decrease in employee compensation there, about $1.6 million. It's about 5%. Slight decrease in benefits. So even though we propose potential decrease in FTEs, the increases in the health premiums make that decrease much smaller. So that's about $91,000. We have a proposed decrease in professional services. And essentially that's due to over budgeting for this year. There's some services that we just simply didn't need to use. Purchase property is going up about 7.7%. Other purchase services, that is going up 12%. And that is where you'll find your transportation costs and your out-of-district tuitions. So that's the primary driver of the budget. And then below that, we have supplies, about a 6% increase, property and capital expenditures, about a 4.8% increase, and our miscellaneous is roughly the same. Again, for a total bottom line decrease of $177,000. Any questions here? Very good. Okay, we will move to slide 20 and we'll zoom into 5 specific line items here. So these are the primary drivers apart from salaries and benefits. You'll notice that 5 line items and other purchase services increased roughly 12.1% over fiscal year 24. And these 5 line items account for 21% of the total operating budget. And the categories you have are transportation and out-of-district tuitions. And Ms. Vetter, you asked a question about that first line, the 55-110s. I actually had that misclassified at the budget subcommittee meeting, so I revised that because that showed about a 4,000% increase. So I had to revise that. And those are for extra transportation contractors in the event that we can't get Ocean State to provide a bus as needed. Any questions here? Excellent. Okay, transitioning to our discussion of the capital fund. So looking at the revenue side, just 2 simple line items. Essentially, we're financing our capital projects through the use of fund balance and federal grant reimbursements. So those E-rate reimbursements, won't bore you with the details of that fund mechanism, but essentially it's just reimbursements from the federal government for capital technology purchases. And then we have our transfer in of our fund balance of $1.1 million, and that's going to finance the $1.2 million in projects. And if we move immediately to slide 23, you will see our proposed list of projects for next year with a focus on building and facilities, our roadways, and our capital equipment and software. So the primary change from the previous presentation is that additional $400,000 for the West Kingston parking.
And also roofing repairs for Peacedale Elementary School.
Correct.
I think, again, just to build on what Ms. Vetter pointed out, a lot of the other costs that aren't going to the elementary school are actually technology related. It's not the physical plant sort of cost. What we're maintaining in terms of the physical building really is the elementary schools.
Correct. Very good. Looking at slide 24, just a quick summary of our expenditure categories for the capital fund. Nothing too significant here. Essentially, you'll see just the same bottom line at the $1.2 million. Okay, moving to all our other funds, our restricted funds. So looking at our federal and state grants, we have a bottom line decrease in all of these funds of about almost 45%, and that's due primarily to the ESSER 3 fund phase out. So those funds expire on September 30th, 2024. Our consolidated resource planning and our Perkins and CTE categorical grants, those amounts are based on the current fiscal year 2024 allocations, only because it's too early in the process to project what those allocations will be next year. So I think what will probably happen is once we get those final allocations, we might have to do another amendment just to make sure we capture that. One important piece to point out here is the $410,000 budgeted for ESSER 3 funds for next year. The reason why we're doing that is because we'll have 3 months in fiscal year 2025 to expend the rest of the funds. We will not be able to commit all of them by June 30th of this year. So we'll have $410,000 more to commit for fiscal year 25. So they will expire after September 30th, 2024, but that gives us 3 months. So I just wanted to make sure we budgeted for it for next year. Questions on this slide? Very good. Looking at the expenditure side, slide 27, you can see essentially the primary decrease is in employee compensation and benefits, and that's tied primarily to the positions that we've been funding through ESSER 3. Okay, very good. Looking at slide 28, our one and single enterprise fund, that's the National School Lunch Program Fund. We're just expecting a slight decrease in meal sales, which is tied to the current year trends. We're trending below budgeted amounts. And also, if we expect enrollment to decline naturally, less kids buying meals, less sales. And again, this fund is financed 100% by meal sales and reimbursements from the federal government and state government. No taxpayer dollars. Okay, looking at fund balance now, moving to slide 30. So first we'll take a look at our fund balance history. So you'll notice in that table at the bottom there, you can see the long-term audited surpluses and ending fund balance amounts. And we are down about 30.5% from the peak in 2019 and 20. And that was the COVID year. Essentially, schools were shut down. So that's why that surplus was so significant. And if you look at the surplus or the deficit line, those are audited surpluses or deficits in that fiscal year. So essentially, we've accumulated just over $2 million in surpluses going back to 2017 and 18, and that's net of other deficits as well. So per our policy, the goal is to maintain a minimum of between 1% and 2% in fund balance. And if you look at the table on the right, you'll see our current operating budget as $62.6 million. So the available fund balance after The commitments to old encumbrances is $2,091,590, and that's about 3.34% of our current operating budget. And below that, you can see the thresholds, the 1% and the 2%. That's the 626 and the 1.2 million. So we're well above that threshold currently. Questions on this slide? There's kind of a lot of information here. Very good. Okay, we'll look at our proposed use of fund balance for next year. So we are proposing using $1,161,356, which is 56% of our current unassigned fund balance to finance our capital projects and not our operations. So we're not creating a structural deficit. And then you'll just see in the table I have there is just a reconciliation, so you can see the prior fund balance amount as of the end of the previous fiscal year. The fiscal 2023 surplus of $255,000 left us with a fund balance of $2,942,000. We had commitments to two separate line items. First is open purchase orders and contracts. Those are the encumbrances at $580,000. And we also committed $270,000 for this year's budget. So that leaves $2,091,590 available for fiscal year 2025. Our proposed uses are exclusively and only for the capital fund next year at $1.1 million. All other things being equal, net of any other, not accounting for any other activity in fiscal 24, that leaves us with a proposed ending fund balance of $930,234. And as a percentage of the proposed budget for next year, that gets us to about 1.49%. So right in the middle of our minimum ranges of the 1 to 2%. It's a pretty significant usage of reserves for 1 year. Questions there? All right, we're almost done. Looking at slide 32, some outstanding contingencies. These are just some items that are out there that could materially impact the budget going forward. So we have our NEASK contract negotiations, depending on what we agree to with the teachers union, that could materially affect salaries and benefits, other categories. We also have the final state aid numbers that will come out, that those numbers will definitely change. They could go up or it could go down. And then lastly, we have the bond vote in May. So if that bond does not pass, that means an increased maintenance budget for the high school, the current high school, and Curtis Corner as well. And the district will not be reimbursed any percentage of the $350,000 that we are paying right now for the OPM and architect services. So we'll just be out that $350,000. And if the bond passes, the town will be reimbursed at the 35% reimbursement rate for those, actually for the higher rate for the OPM architect services. So these are some things that could impact the budget going forward.
So I want to clarify on that, right? So if the bond passes, the town will be reimbursed, hopefully at that 55% rate, but the town will be reimbursed.
Correct.
The
Goes to-
school will not be,
Correct.
our funds will not, we will not receive those funds. The town will receive those funds, as they have with all the other reimbursement from
Correct.
housing aid in the past that never came back to the schools. There's a reason why I'm enunciating myself when I make those statements. It's because when they ask us, how are we contributing to the debt service? Well, when the reimbursement comes in, it's going to the town. It's not coming to the school district. And I think that's a super important point to kind of really drive home and understand and grasp, because that has happened historically with us. So anytime we've done, I would be actually be interested, and I'm not tasking you with it, but I'm just kind of throwing it out into the ethers, is we built Broad Rock Middle School. And the housing aid reimbursement that South Kingstown received from the reimbursement for that went to the town, and it never made its way to the school, correct? If I'm correct. I'm assuming,
I have no reason to doubt you, Ms. Masson.
Yeah.
We'd have to
I'm
look.
saying it so authoritatively, it must be true. But I mean, from my understanding is that is what has historically happened. So I just find it interesting. It's just a little tidbit of information that was new for me, and I felt that it should be shared. And I'm not complaining, and I'm not demanding back pay, retro pay. But what I'm saying is the school obviously does contribute. In that, we never see the reimbursement come to us, unless somebody can correct me. I'm happy to be wrong.
Something worth investigating, sure.
So, so being the historian sitting at the table here, when we discussed that at one of the recent budget subcommittee meetings, and the fact that that reimbursement money was going back to the town, like, I had to like go back and review my notes a couple of times because I was, and people at this table know I'm really speechless. But I was like amazed. So we paid, just never mind going back historically, because that will just upset my stomach. But this year, we paid the $350,000 for the OPM out of our fund balance. And assuming,
Actually, we paid it out of operating funds, not fund balance.
thank you, we paid it out of operating funds. And assuming that the bond passes, that will get reimbursed at hopefully 52, 55. I didn't think we could go there. Percent, and that money will go back to the town. So certainly tomorrow night, if the question, which it's come up at every joint meeting in my memory, what is the school department going to do? We need to itemize these things that have already been done.
Great point.
Thank you, Mr. Kilpatrick.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, and on that note, Ms. Bruce, I would point out that $350,000 that we committed was out of our capital fund. And we decided to forego capital projects that were in our capital plan to lay, for lack of a better term, lay the money on the line, hoping that we would get a favorable vote in May 7th. The reimbursement will go directly to the town. What the town chooses to do with that is entirely within their purview. But that our capital projects and our capital needs still remain.
Okay, last slide here. Looking at our summary, we have a total bottom line decrease of $1,522,623, which is a decrease of 2.2%. So essentially, I'm asking you to approve $66,816,779 for fiscal year 2025.
So I just want to clarify. So this is a second revision. However, the bottom line is not being revised. It's simply, we are showing the 400,000 that in total out of fund balance for the West Kingston parking lot, where it was split between categories before.
Correct. Just to clarify, the bottom line is increasing slightly. So I proposed a 2.6% decrease last time. It's a smaller decrease this time, 2.2%. So it's only going up by that additional $400,000 or $222,000 essentially, which is the additional fund balance appropriation.
Any further questions for Mr. Kilpatrick?
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we need a motion to?
Yeah, I think we need to vote. So I would like to make a motion to accept the revised budget as presented by Mr. Kilpatrick.
Second.
And
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. Next item on the agenda is annual calendar revise. I'll turn that over to Mr. Little.
We had a snow day, Madam Chair. We had a snow day on February 13, you will recall. And because of that snow day, our 23-24 calendar is in need of revision, where our day 180 would move from June 18 to June 20, with June 19 being a state holiday. So I would ask the committee to make a recommendation. My recommendation is to revise the calendar to recognize the February 13 day and make the adjustment to make day 180 June 20th.
Make a motion to approve the superintendent's recommendation for the school year 2023-2024 annual calendar.
Mr. Lucina.
Yes, I just had a question. Are we applying to ride at all for, as it being a state of emergency to get that day waived?
The word that we're getting from the commissioner's office is that there is not much of a stomach for waiving that day. So it was a day that you'll recall that state workers were told to stay home. But that schools had already canceled for that day. So I don't anticipate any word coming from the Department of Education that we don't have to make up the day.
Is that something where we wait for them to tell us, or is that something we can request, or it's a statewide decision?
We can request it. However, every district in the state is in that same position. I do know that our neighbor to the west applied for a waiver because of flooding that closed roads, and there was no way that they could get buses to the children, and the children could not get to school, and that request was denied. So they're making up those 2 days that they had that they incurred because of flooding, not the snow.
So, while looking at this in detail, and I'm sure that it's something I missed when I looked at it before, and I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I try to type things out and it just kind of bugs me. But I want to ask you if I'm seeing this correctly. On December 5th, which is bright yellow, where the far right, where the bright yellow is, says elementary, middle school in session, no school for the high school. But then you go over to December 5th and read in session high school, pre-K to 8, no school, which is just the opposite of what it says in yellow. No school, high school, but here it says in session high school. So there's a disconnect. I think it is true that it's in session high school, pre-K to K, no school, because those are parent-teacher conferences, correct? But I think all the way to the
Excellent pickup,
right.
Ms. Fetter. I will tell you that's an excellent pickup. That's a typo.
Okay,
On December 5th, the high school was in session.
okay,
Children in elementary schools and the middle school, they did not go to school that day so that teachers could have their parent conferences. And
so,
then the corresponding day is May 23rd,
right,
where elementary and middle school students, they will be in session, but the high school will not.
right. And that rose colored says that no school for elementary and middle. So I don't want them to think they can stay home that day.
My goodness, no. So we will get that correct. So
Okay.
we'll correct that typo and we'll make sure that word goes out so that there's no confusion.
Okay, great. Thank you.
would we need to amend the motion then to, or just bring it back?
It strikes me that it just needs, the little number 5 in December needs to be pink and the little number 23 in May needs to be yellow instead of.
Yes.
Yeah,
that
more
would
of a
fix it.
color typo than textual typo. So but the question does remain, I mean, we can pass this right now just to get it on the books, but will we need to or can we make an amendment that says it passes pending the color swap? It seems a little off, but
Can you remind me what the motion that was actually?
so it was to approve the superintendent's recommendation of the revised calendar.
I think that is fine, provided that the superintendent's recommendation incorporates those changes.
So my recommended changes to you is for day 180 to be moved from June 18 to June 20, and for the colors on December 5th and May 23rd to be switched in order to avoid confusion.
Aye.
Aye, that motion passes. Okay. do
Thank
we
you,
have a
Madam Chair.
motion?
And just one note that I'll be presenting to you for your consideration the suggested calendar for the 2024-2025 school year at our next school committee meeting.
Thank you for that. So, yeah. Yeah. Motion. Yeah. So I would like to open up the floor at this time for anybody that came in after we got started and wanting to make a community comment. Ms. Beasley, did you? I don't know.
The timing of tomorrow night's meeting. Is it not the 6 o'clock? Is it the 6 to 7 that the Studio Jade and Left Field will be there?
That was, I'm not quite sure what happened. The intention initially, when we were discussing at school building committee, was we'd have a 6 o'clock start, but the agendas got posted and it's 7 o'clock start now. So we won't be there at 6. So hopefully other people are listening as well, because it was discussed. But it is, I saw the agendas today and it's, all that discussion will take place starting at 7.
Okay. So I guess my only thing I want to talk briefly about tonight is informing the public about the referendum. It hasn't really started yet. You have 7, now you're down to 7 weeks. When you look at the audience here on many a night, you can see with your own eyes that people are not, they're not interested. And how are you gonna, I hope you're thinking about how you're gonna get people cranked up about going to the polls on May 7th, voting yes. It's like I've said before, this cannot fail. Cannot fail. I had a meeting this morning with your superintendent, assistant superintendent, and your CFO, and I left there depressed. just feel that, my plea to try and find some way to reduce your budget so that the taxpayers get a break. People on fixed incomes, 35% of which 20,000 registered voters in South Kingstown, 7,200 are 60 or older. And they're gonna have early voting and they're gonna have mail voting. Was mentioned last night at the town council meeting, so if people want to vote, they're gonna vote. So the last referendum, only 35% of the voters showed up at the polls. I believe you're gonna have a bigger turnout here, but you have to get these people. You have to get those people interested. There are people still in town, because I hear it in conversation. There's still people in this town that have a sour taste from the last referendum.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned at 8:41. Have a good night, all. Thank you.